what is ready then? Like, by your standards, I'm 28, I've been dating this girl for 10 years, and I'm not man enough to put a ring on her finger and respect her enough to have a family and actually do what a relationship's supposed to do. Men were just men. They're just 18, they're married, they got a job, and actually knew how to change a tire, things like that, or tie, just basic things. And this is like, we just want to be kids forever. That's why we're not ready.
Welcome back to another episode of PPK. Hope you are all having a happy and blessed Lent. We are, what day are we counting in Exodus 90?
104.
Feels like it. I think we're like 73 or something.
Yeah, we've got like 18 more days or something like that. So who's counting when you're 90 days away from it? So we're almost there. Welcoming Miko back. What's up, Meeks?
What's going on, guys?
All the way from Stu.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Inspiration today is coming to me. Yeah, just thinking about this question I constantly get asked, and I think you guys get asked as well, is about dating and discernment. And I'm probably sure, since we all fit the categories, you're all too young to get married. You're too young to settle down. You're too young to start a family. You're too whatever. So we figured, you know what, we can all speak to that, you two, in a very specific way, because you're living that right now. Your mom and I are a little further removed from that, but we have something to say about that. So just kind of wanted to dialogue, because I know there's a lot of different demographics, but a lot of parents watch this, but also a lot of youth, right? A lot of your peer groups. We've been getting, shout out to Ray and the Joy of Faith. We've been getting a lot of people getting active on the channel, so we appreciate you, Ray. And a lot of people have been jumping on. We've been seeing a lot of comments come through, and even on Ray's channel, where some of the folks who saw our discussion, our PPK episode on the Joy of Faith, where you had some 20-year-olds, right, really excited about other people in their peer group, like Meeks and Keone, living out that faith and that call vibrantly, but also, right, living a life of virtue and living a life that aligns well with the vocation that you've been called to. So just want to kind of open it up, because Keone is newly married in October 10/10/2020, and Miko is about to be married in 2 months, right, Meeks?
Yeah, it's coming quick. It'll get you,
And, Mom and I are celebrating, 26 years of marriage this year. So we know a little something about marriage. So I'm going to start with the newlywed in the house. Keone, what say you about dating and discernment? First and foremost, let's start backwards. What made you know that Michelle, your beloved bride, was the one?
I actually get asked that question a lot. What I always tell people is that I knew that Michelle was the one when in the honeymoon, like, wow, there's this new girl and we start talking for a few weeks, like that time period, right? I knew that Michelle was the one when I couldn't find something wrong with her. And when I say something wrong, like something that I would like usually do is when I would be talking to different girls and trying to see if I should date them or whatever. I would like almost self-sabotage the relationship. I'd be like, well, I can't because of this. And it could be anything from a physical attribute or a belief system or something. I'd find something within the first couple weeks. And I remember I would talk to my mom, me being in Ohio at the time and trying to figure out like, if I'm called to marriage and when that call would really come full front. And it was when I met Michelle that, a couple weeks went by. I'm like waiting for something to come up, so I'm feeling, free. I get to move on and nothing was there. And I was like, all right, I guess we're going to give this one a shot. So it was at that point where I found a lot of peace, where I wasn't looking at the potential downfalls or the negative attributes, but I saw her for her, and I loved it, and I wanted to know more. And I think it was at that point I was like, okay, I'm going to give I'm gonna give her a chance. I'm gonna give this a chance, and God really did the rest there. So yeah,
that's awesome. That's awesome. So Meeks, how did you know Ella was the one?
Yeah, that's a tough one too. Just because I was 15 when we started dating, so I don't even know if I was the one. It's hard to know. I mean, it was kind of similar to Keely. At least I don't know if I could say exactly when I knew she was the one. But the first reason why I was even interested was kind of like Keely, because we had talked for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. I mean, and I like still had interest, which was like one of the first times I'd done that. I mean, I was 15, so obviously you're not super interested for a long period of time at that age into anything. And so I was really just, I think you could see like the ride or die in Ella very early on. Just inviting her to church, inviting her to all these other things, and her just feeling like, yeah, I'm down for literally everything. And like took a couple months of us talking. She wanted to get her sacraments, and so just all these things that she was just on board with really drove me like, wow, this is a pretty special girl I'm dealing with. And I remember like specifically one time just kind of sitting her down and being like, hey, might be a deal breaker for you, but like here's everything I believe in, you know, from all the Catholic Church stances to some of my political beliefs, all these kind of things. And she was just kind of like, yeah, sounds good to me. And I was like, all right, you want to get married now or should we wait? Because then I was like 16 by that time. And then I think once I knew I was like really discerning marriage, because obviously at 15 it's hard to say that I was really discerning marriage at the time. I think just like growing up, and the more you realize how special the person you have is right in front of you, and like kind of looking out and just seeing like other relationships fail, and kind of looking out into the world and being like, wow, that's kind of a lot of crap out there, and like something I have here can't really be replicated. And then also just her willingness to like want to be a mom, and her priorities aligning with mine, starting a family, raising kids in the church, all those kind of things that I knew I was just somehow able to find at Downey High School in Modesto, California. Wasn't Franciscan, wasn't Central Catholic, wasn't none of those, wasn't a youth group. I think over time you just kind of realize, or I just kind of realized that God had put Ella into my life, and it was my duty to make sure I put it in the bag, you know, and make sure I secure those. And so that's what kind of what I just had to do.
Nice. So let's talk about, you know, it's kind of like a question, I'm sure, for a lot of people out there, approaching the approach to dating. So in kind of the Catholic sphere, we often hear like you date to discern marriage, right? So, you know, there's multiple vocations for those of you out there. There is the married life. Most of us are called to the married life, but we know about holy orders and the priesthood and religious life, religious sisters, consecrated singles, consecrated virgins. There's a lot of that out there. So how did, I'll go back to Keone, how did you approach dating in that context, and, you know, what's your thoughts about it in today's world?
Well, similar to what Mika was saying, like, we didn't really have interest for a lot of things, like, especially when it came to, like, talking to different girls, it didn't last pretty, like, long. I know we're really busy, and we're engaged in sports, and there's passion. So for, like, a girl to come into our lives and to really, like, okay, this is important. I mean, for better or for worse, you know, it didn't stick. And as far as, like, the other vocations, I mean, I don't think Holy Orders was in Meek's bag or my bag. There was never an inclination like, maybe you can be a priest. I think there was priests who I would look up to and I would like respect. I'm like, wow, that's really cool. But it was never like, I want to do that, or, you know, I feel called to do that. And, you know, to be honest, there was moments where I was like, is it going to come though? Like, am I going to go to a retreat and out of nowhere, there's this overwhelming, like, that's your calling. And I'm like, no, just wake myself up, you know? But I never had that call. And as I got more mature in my faith, I would actually, you know, Lord, if it is an opening, like, if you want me to be a priest, you can let me know. You better let me know loud and clear, because I'm going to this direction. But yeah, I never really had that inclination, not even the slightest. I always knew I wanted to be a husband. I wanted to be a father. And, you know, I chose from the moment, what was it, 8th grade when I was confirmed? something like that.
Yeah.
Freshman, yeah, 8th grade. And, you know, my patron saint was St. Joseph. Just, you know, just growing up, wanting to be a father, wanting to play sports with my kiddos growing up, wanting to have a wife and to start a family and start a life together. That was always something that was always really excited to do. But like I said, when I met Michelle, it was, it became serious, kind of like Meeks was saying, because we were so passionate about the things that took our time and attention. Schoolwork, where we did the best, where it's, you know, we don't get B's type of mentality. You know, when we're in sports, we put everything in, we grind to be the best we can be. So why would that be any different with our intimate relationships? You know, like, it's not worth my time. And so as I was dating, even in high school, a couple of things is, it was usually my Catholic faith. So I think if I'm looking back at it, I never dated someone that wasn't Catholic, and I mean, majority, if not all of them, were non-practicing, really, but they were Catholic, and I made that a point going into it because of the belief system. Like, we can start there. So that was something that was really important to me, but I think that's something that's kind of missed now. I feel like you mentioned, you know, how is this kind of happening nowadays? I think more people are just in question. Like, even, you know, back in the day, like when I was in high school, and it was like, yeah, I'm Catholic and I go to mass every once in a while, and it was kind of like that. But now I feel like it's even more of a question. Like, I don't even know if I'm Catholic. My parents are kind of Catholic, but I'm more like spiritual, or like, you know, like it's. I feel like it's gotten even more removed. Exactly. Like, they're just like kind of somewhere in the ethos, just like vibing. Yeah, that's what I feel like it is now, based on what I've heard, just from the youth.
Yeah.
So I think it's harder nowadays because of, first of all, everything is social media, like everything about who you are. And, you know, there's this PC culture. So to say, like, I have a religious background that does say some things are actually wrong and even sinful, that's hard to do for men or women. So I think it's more difficult nowadays, but something that was important to, I know, Meeks and I, when we were really wanting to discern dating someone, was, do we align, like, mentally, you know, because there's going to be the physical attraction that's going to come, but for us to, like, actually pause our lifestyle, everything that we were involved in, and to do that, we had to have some sort of, like, mental similarity, or else it wouldn't last long.
Meeks, what about you? How did you approach it?
Well, Ella's the only girl I ever dated, so I don't have, like, a plethora of stories to tell. But for me, similar to Keone, even in girls, I was maybe, like, entertaining a thought, maybe was talking to a little bit. I always, like, trying to detect if there was, like, a foundation there, maybe if they weren't practicing Catholic, or maybe they're open to it, something like that. Ella was baptized, and Ella didn't have any of our sacraments. And so for me, that's why I had that talk and sat her down with those, because it was like, if you can't agree with these things, there's nothing else I could really do, because you're not trying to spend the whole relationship changing that person. You guys have to be, like, helping each other grow. And so obviously, as someone who is responsible for being brought up in the faith, I contain a greater responsibility to help show her and guide her in things that she wasn't guided in, and her parents didn't teach her. But at the same time, I can't spend my whole relationship just changing a person, hoping that one day, when, you know, maybe we have 2 kids, they'll figure it out then, or stuff like that. So for me, it was huge to just, like, have that talk, and I never was just thinking about dating for fun in any time before Ella or anything like that. It was, I don't know, it was just like, either we're doing this and we're gonna be married, or we're just wasting our time. And so I was just kind of brought up with that mentality from what you and Mom had told us, was like, just date to get married, and if you're not doing that, then you shouldn't be dating that person. So I was just like, man, that sounds like pretty true to me. I don't know why I wouldn't just kind of just date for fun, that kind of idea. And I mean, that was my biggest thing, was just trying to figure out, is this person someone that's going to take the faith seriously? Because if not, then there's going to be too much. I mean, I think the more that you grow up and more in your relationship, you realize how much baggage you carry into that, and how much you have to kind of like work on yourself, and then to imagine trying to work all that out for the other person because they have no knowledge of faith or maybe no motivation to get more into the faith, it would just be a nightmare. So it's just something I kind of try to stay away from.
You know, you bring up a huge point, because, and this is probably more of a female problem than it is a male problem. But what you identified was so many people see people as projects. Well, I can change them, right? I mean, I'm like, you can't change anybody. You know what I mean? If that person doesn't want to change, and how many people end up saying, we'll get together, get married, and then just like you said, well, let me work on them. And then when you marry them 2 years later, with 3 kids later, 2 kids later, 1 kid later, 5 years later, whatever that time frame is, it's just like, well, you knew what you got into when you married me. This is who you married. But so many people think that they can, because they're all lovey-dovey emotionally in love, they meet somebody like, oh, they'll change for me. And then they compromise. And then, so that's pretty, but maybe that's a shout out to me and mom for instilling that, at least in your brain, right? I think, as the youngest in the household. But what do you think about that, Keone? Because I think that's an issue we see today in the dating world, especially is, I can change that person, and then their heart gets broken, and then, God forbid they are married and they end up getting a divorce, and then, kids are without one of the parents, or they're living in broken homes, and that's what we see definitely in the world today.
Yeah, I think it's huge. As Meeks was talking about it, I was like, no, that's 100% true, and I even saw it in my life. But I think just given the culture today, people who are dating, even to get to the point of dating, they have to have some sort of desire for like deep, true intimacy, some sort of permanency, something real. Because I mean, like you said, with the hookup culture or whatever it may be, it's so just quick and fleeting, right? So to even get to the point, I think in today's culture to date, there has to be some sort of like existential like connection that I think you would have. But I would say I feel like oftentimes, just based on what I've heard from friends and through social media and youth or whatever, I feel like oftentimes there's one person who's usually more of a belief than the other, and it's oftentimes, like you said, the female. That has more of a belief system and often tries to change the other person. Well, I'm gonna I'm gonna evangelize, or I'm gonna love them so much that they're just going to want to change and be the man that they should be, or be the woman that they should be, or whatever. And usually, I know, especially if it's the man that needs to change, why do they need the change?
Right.
And then, like you said, the situation where they get married, it's like, well, I'm already married to you. Why do I need to stand up and change myself? That's not easy to do. And kind of as Meeks was describing his relationship with Ella and her openness, that's really another thing that I forgot to mention with Michelle, my wife, is her openness. And I knew that like from the get-go. I think it was like 2 weeks into it, I invited her to praise and worship and to confession. And I don't think she went to confession from pretty much since her first reconciliation or confirmation. Like, it was a while, and for her to even take on that challenge and to be open, I knew like, okay, this is a keeper. Regardless of whether or not she was at my level spiritually, or she knew as much as I did theologically, it didn't matter, because she was open. And I think that's a key part, because a lot of people that I see in relationships or dating, they have this faith, they want to have a strong relationship. The other person is like halfway in, halfway out, but they're not really open to changing. They're like, I'm just going to stay at this point, and that's going to enough to keep you like at least kind of satisfied, not like going insane, but I'm not going to actually try to be the best version of myself for the other, and try to get to heaven, and try to bring the other person to heaven. I don't think that's a conversation that's often had. And so I would just say, for the women especially, I would say, because I feel like oftentimes women are more desired of the relationship, right? They want to keep the connection. Whereas men are usually more of like, hands-on. I do the task, I complete the task, So it's a little bit harder for men, because they just kind of, the relationship is not really what they're vibing with. They're like, I just go to work, I do my thing, and then I go kiss my wife, and I say what's up, and then, I just like boom, boom, boom. But women are often like, they can take a beating, and they can be disrespected or, disregarded to keep that relationship, in hopes that their love will be finally recognized, right? And the man will be like, oh my gosh, I've been treating you so poorly. You love me so unconditionally. I need to change. That's often not the case, unfortunately, you know. And I think, you know, for women, it's about having that honest conversation. Like, is the man actually going to be open to changing? Is he going to grow in virtue? Do you see him making you a better Christian, a better Catholic? Do you see him trying to right his wrongs and also help you get to heaven? And then for the men, if you are in the faith and you're discerning, I think men are in an advantage if they're of the faith, because they can lead someone, a girl who is kind of maybe astray, because of that kind of advantage that women will still want to. Typically, women will want to keep their relationship. They'll want to keep the connection. And that's more meaningful than it usually would be for a man when it comes to letting go of things that are hard. And so it's our responsibility, like Meeks and I, you know, both of the girls that we started talking to and ended up, you know, wanting to marry, or me marrying, well, they were open. They weren't full on going to mass on Sunday. They weren't, you know, practicing Catholics, but they were open. And it was our job as men to lead and say, okay, like Meeks was saying, like, this is my beliefs. This is what I'm passionate about. This is how I view the world. Are you with me? And it's not like I'm going to drag you kicking and screaming, but are you with me? And it's just I was going to mention this after Miko shared his story. It's a dance. You know, it's not easy to do. This is the first couple of years I was dating Michelle. It was really hard because we were just at different levels spiritually. And there's a part of you that wants to bring her with you. But there's another part that you kind of need to slow down and let God be the one that's converting her heart. And there's temptation, I think, at least for me, to want to control that process. You know, I want to speed it up, or I want to bring her here because there's some sort of maybe anxiety that, you know, maybe I made a mistake, or there's this grasp for control. I want it to be this way now. And that's just a really hard thing to do, is to be super patient with someone who's open. You know, it's already patient with someone who's not open, but when they are open, we tend to like want to jump the gun. Okay, you're open, let me throw all this stuff at you. Why aren't you changing? And just kind of stepping back and be like, it's a hard thing to actually change. Being open is the first step, of course, but actually going through the brutal process of letting go of habits, building new habits, that's hard to do. And it just takes a lot of patience. So it was great that both of our significant others were open, but it took a lot for us. I mean, Meeks, you can speak for yourself, but it took a lot for me, at least, to be really patient, to like do it, not because I want to, not because this is how I do it all the time, this is my faith, this is what I've always done, but let her find her own faith, obviously in accordance with the teachings of the church, but her own relationship with God. It's not my relationship with God, it's hers. And letting her find that.
If I could, I want to throw something out there you guys can comment on, but it's something that I see a lot at Franciscan, and I think it's like a lot has to do with like practicing Catholics, but it's almost like the flip side of that, where I see a lot of people like will want like jump in the gun, like this is probably the one because like he looked at me at mass and like this is for sure gonna be it. And then like almost like there's a lot of relationships and they start running into issues, and I'm not trying to diss, but like at Franciscan, a lot of kids, or even a lot of practicing Catholics, they'll be in a bubble because their parents, you know, they want to protect them, they don't want to kind of like to get them to be propagandized and all that kind of stuff, which I understand. But at the same time, like they don't have a lot of like relationship experience. And so in their mind, like as long as you're both theologically aligned and similar, that like everything else should be easy. So I find like a lot of relationships, I'm speaking mostly from Franciscan because I don't have a lot of like Catholic friends at home, but people here, they run into issues, and then it's like, man, what's God telling me? Like, this can't be the one. Then, like, God must be trying to show me something here. And it's just like, or it's called a relationship. And like, we had a Bible study in my household, and I remember St. Paul essentially saying like, it's easier to be single. Like, maybe just like do that. Like, for those of you who want a relationship, like, you know, like debatable. Like maybe you don't really want to do that because it's easier to be single. And I remember that one kind of hitting me because I'm like, you know, this stuff is really tough. Like and like I know a lot of people are like, oh, what do you know? You're 14, you're in the honeymoon phase, this and that. And I think like if I was still in the honeymoon phase, I don't know if I'd actually be ready for marriage. Like obviously, like I'm in love with her and all that kind of stuff. But like if we just never argued, then there's no way I'd be ready for marriage. Because I think a lot of people, especially at like maybe a lot of really practicing Catholics, they tend to fall into the camp of like, oh, arguments is stuff when you're like already 20 years married and all that kind of stuff, until you like, really find out about just like love languages and there's different packages that you bring. Like our upbringing has so much to do with how we interact and how like certain things will trigger us that we're not really sure about, and maybe how my dad responded when I was young is how I'm going to respond, and I don't really recognize that. And there's so many things that go into it that we tend to like overlook because, well, this person's Catholic and I'm Catholic. And I think a lot of people, especially for parents, I think teaching your kids to understand like you need to go through these, you need to experience, like relationships are just hard work, and there's so many things like love languages that can kind of seem like cringy sometimes and a little bit extra, but they're real, even though LX denies sometimes because they're very conflicting love languages. But all those stuff are true. That's how you express love to that person, and sometimes they don't receive it in the way that you express it, and that's going to cause arguments. Yeah. And then there's just so many things where I just want to, you want to discourage people from trying to fix people, and then you want to discourage them from also trying to run away and say, well, is God calling me elsewhere because there's issues in this relationship, which seems to happen a lot, at least on my campus, which would mean with young practicing Catholics as well. I mean, it's assuming, which may be wrong to assume, but that's just what I'm going for.
Well, here's the thing with that, because I think it's, as Catholics, we're both and. So I think it is important that you guys are religious, faithfully aligned, theologically aligned, but you don't just throw that out and say, but I'm not going to work on to your point, Miko, well, because of that, I'm not going to work on the relationship because it also just as if Catholicism is like this, this magic pill that we somehow just take, or, some type of fairy dust that we have and we put it over the relationship and then it's going to make it better. No, we bring in the family of origins. You have love languages, you have temperaments, you have your own wounds that you may be bringing in. You may come in from a well intact family. They may come in from a dysfunctional or divorced or multiple whatever situation, drug addictions, you name it, just all this stuff that comes in there. But I think when I say both and, it means, I think the faith, because you're rooted in Christ, right? It's a sacrament for a reason, that you need the grace of God working in it. It's sanctifying. It's a sacrament of service. You talked about this is a self-giving sacrament of vocation. You got to die to yourself every single day, especially as men, to serve your wife and your children if God blesses you with those, and so on and so forth. That being said, does that mean, all of a sudden every day is glorious and butterflies and rainbows? No. Every day when the honeymoon stage you described, Meeks, is really getting out of the emotional side of love, right? Like, it's, the nostalgia associated with all of that. It's like, great. And then all of a sudden you open the presents and life starts, right? Wedding day's over and like, boom, you're living together. You have a little irritations. Like you said, you react to things differently. And I think what people miss is you signed up for that. When people get married, they typically hear, the vows. They hear, good, rich, and healthy. And then when things go, you're poor, sick, and bad, then they say, I didn't sign up for this. And I was like, no, you did, actually. You signed up for in good times and in bad, for rich or for poor, and sick, in sickness and in health. But all they heard because they're all emotional and everything's good, is just the good, the healthy, and the rich. And that takes work. When we have struggles, this is a person that you discern that God selected for you ultimately to get to heaven. Not to get your 401k, not to get the nice house, not to get the nice career, not to have life work out the way you dreamt it would, but to get you to heaven, ultimately.
Yeah, I think that's something I ran into when I was at Franciscan too. And I think it's a temptation we can have is, when you're discerning God's will, especially for an intimate other, and discerning dating or marriage, and that person potentially comes up, you're like, oh, is this the one, God? And you get super excited. And then a bump comes in the road and you're like, okay, maybe it's not. Like, all right, God, thanks for the sign. But I saw that a lot of Franciscan, you start talking to someone and what do? You take them to Mass. And Sunday Mass, you see like the new couples and it's like, oh shoot, what's going on here? It's a new couple. They're going to Mass. That's pretty sick. Now they're at the calf sitting together. Like, whoa, that's huge. Like that's just how it went. But I think it's a sign of the faith ultimately. And why I say that is because I think we can fall into the temptation if a majority of our faith is very emotion, like charismatic, praise and worship. It feels good. I get the next high. which, these Steubenville conferences can be, retreats can be, stuff like that. And they're all good things. Definitely. They serve their purpose.
Mm-hmm.
But if there isn't a deeper level of faith that, seeks virtue, that like is overcoming your greatest defect, that is seeing the power of sacrifice and suffering for another, if that's not a part of your faith, then, what do you expect, right? If your faith is, it feels good, my relationship with God is always just so powerful and meaningful, and I feel him all the time with the songs and everything. Well, what do you think when you're meeting someone intimate, which is a reflection of God's love, someone you want to spend the rest of your life with, right? Mm-hmm. And it doesn't feel good. Well, it must not be from God. Because my relationship with God is always good. It's always this song. It's the smoke and mirrors, right? Exactly. It's just pure vibes. And I think that's just a temptation that we all could have. It's like we see the bump in the road and like, okay, God, no, you would never do that, right? And it's actually that bump in the road that God may be calling you to overcome so that you can, one, be more open to his grace, but to allow it to perfect nature. And to actually help you to grow in virtue, to grow in love for each other through that obstacle. Not that every, person you meet, if there's a clear red flags, you're like, no, God's calling me to suffer through this. No, but, if you're dating someone and they're open to virtue, they're open to getting, you to heaven, and you're open to getting them to heaven, there's going to be bumps in the road. Because I was just, you think about just practically, you're taking two very different lives, upbringings, family of origins, sufferings, attachments, and you're going to try to make that one. Mm-hmm. How difficult can that be when the puzzle pieces are not like this perfect match? And like, click, there it is. Here's the puzzle piece. It's not like that. Yeah. And God says you're going to have to bend and break to fit those pieces to make one flesh. And that is our call. Why do we think that's going to be easy? And that's that's the same thing with our faith. God is going to provide, but we have to be willing to bend and break and suffer to let go of the things that are worldly, the things that are broken, to better fit with him and become, his son or his daughter. Mm-hmm. And that takes work for us if we're open to it.
Right. Yeah. So
yeah.
Go ahead, Meeks.
I was just gonna. I don't want to play host here because that's not my job. But there's another thing that I just want to address because it's like something I hear a lot as within like people that are, or just people my age essentially, or like just the whole like when people talk to me about being ready, that irritates me most. And like obviously, Dad, you can speak to this way more than I can. But I'll just offer my 20-year-old perspective. That'll probably change in 3 months. But I think this whole idea of like being ready to me is like the most nonsensical thing of all time. I think it's like a symptom of, I think college is huge. That's a symptom of college for sure, because we get to just party and have fun and be kids and hang out for 4 years. And then we just have no clue what we're doing because college doesn't actually teach you life lessons. It just puts you in debt and you learn some vocab terms and you're ready to go. And so I think that's a huge reason. Obviously, our examples of what relationships are in video games, all that kind of stuff, playing Fortnite for 8 hours a day till we're 27 and just all this stuff. People be like, oh, no, man, I need to graduate. But then when they graduate, they need a house. But they have a house, but they don't really have a car. They need a new car. They need all these things in order to be ready. And the reality is, like, you'll never be ready. And there's a lot of people who talk to me. They're like, dang, man, you're getting married in 2 months. That's crazy. Like, I need to figure my life out. Like, oh, man, I'm so behind. And I'm just like, dude, do you think I have my life figured out? The only luxury that I had is that I was able to meet Ella in high school. That's the luxury I had. And I'm just man enough to say, like, I don't want to graduate and still be driving to each other's houses and doing all this stuff. Like, I just want to live. Like, I know I'm going to struggle after college, but I'd rather do it with her than do it on my own. That's the only difference. It's not that, like, I may have to go back to Starbucks or DoorDash this summer. I don't know. You'd think I have an internship, but I don't yet. I have to figure out where I'm going to live next semester because we have 1 semester left here. There's a lot of things I don't know, and so I think this, like, myth that you have to be ready or, like, this is the standard of being ready, that one irritates me a lot because then, like, a lot of parents try to tell me I'm not ready, which is fantastic to always hear. And just, like, what is ready then? Like, by your standards, I'm 28. I've been dating this girl for 10 years, and I'm not man enough to put a ring on her finger and respect her enough to have a family and actually do what a relationship's supposed to do, or just those kind of things always irritate me. And just like looking back and seeing that, earlier in times and like 1950s and all those times, and just like men were just men. They're just 18, they're married, they got a job, and actually knew how to change a tire, things like that, or tie, just basic things. And this is like, we just want to be kids forever. That's why we're not ready.
Yeah.
And I guilty pleasure, I watch The Bachelor, right? Sorry, I watch The Bachelor, but this guy is 29. He's on The Bachelor to get engaged. He's finally about to get engaged, and he's sitting there like, oh man, I don't know if I'm ready for this. It's literally what you signed up for. The whole point of Bachelor is go through, these 27 women, find out, you get engaged, and he's 29 and still debating, man, I'm not sure if it's just like, what are we doing here? It's but that's a representation of what people are today. It's just like, I want to control when I have the kids. I want to control all these things. They're never open. You guys don't want to grow up. That's the whole point of it. You just want to be in a frat forever. You want to be living this life forever. And I don't know, marriage is the best thing to do and St. Paul says for those who struggle with, I think lust and stuff like that, it's best to get married and things like that. So those things will kind of help you out in that sort of your life. So you're not out there and being on The Bachelor, essentially. Is go find a relationship and go stick by that person's side, and they'll help you grow. And so, I don't know, there's a lot of things, but you guys can do with that what you want. That just always irritates me.
Yeah, it was funny. I was actually where I was going next, right? Because the whole point was you're too young to get married. And I think everybody needs discernment, and it's different for each person. And I used to be of the camp. When before I had my reversion, and when I was, indoctrinated into secular humanism and Marxism. Just kidding. But anyway, when I was sipping the Kool-Aid of the culture, that's what it is, right? What they mean is two things, honestly, or maybe three things. One is when you think you're materially ready, right? Which means it's a selfish outlook, and don't get in the way of whatever I want to do, right? Because it's this is my ambitions, this is my goals. Look at the fight over what we call, the feminism and everything else that's going on today, right? Somehow being a mom is looked down upon. And I'm the most difficult, most important jobs you'll ever have is as a spouse and as a parent, because that's going to either bless or curse the culture we live in, the society. And we can see what has swung the other way because we've taken God out and we don't value marriage and family. But I think it's a selfish outlook, and I think you're right. We've emasculated definitely a lot of men out there because they don't know. Was it Father Chad we were talking about that? If you weren't ready to get married by 18, you weren't even considered a man, right? You're just you're probably they are looking at you in the corner,
to be out on your own. Yeah.
Yeah. If you weren't ready because you weren't ready to step up and be a man. To take on a wife and a family, to provide for them, to protect them, to serve them. And there's just a lot of men who, going back to the point we were talking about, the difficulties of, what the compromises, especially women that are making out there, right? Used to be a saying, there's still a saying, right? Why buy the cow when the milks are free, right? There's people I don't need to work hard, because the women have lowered the bar. Because they feel like they have to, because they don't see enough good men out there, because all our men are playing Fortnite 8 hours a day and you know what I mean?
On their Switch until 2 a.m.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, doing whatever they're doing, being little boys, and not manning up and stepping up. And so women feel like they have to either compromise or overly overcompensate for the areas that we're not fulfilling. But I would just say, speaking of that, as far as, being ready in the sense, I think being ready, you need to be ready. You have to have a clear understanding of what you're about to take on, right? So, Miko, Keone, you knew that I'm about to be a husband, and I'm a husband. And then if God blesses you, I'm about to be a father. Well, there's a certain level of responsibility. You don't really know, right? You can see, you can understand, we can talk about it, we can have some formation, but you won't know until you step into it and it hits you in your face. But you're putting in the work now. It's training day, right? So you're putting in that's the thing, going back to even your fellow peers at Franciscan, is are you putting in the work to deal with the relationship aspect of marriage, the sacrifice aspect of marriage, the virtue aspect of marriage? Are you putting in that work? Because there's gonna be a time, whether it's a week or 10 years after you say yes and I do in front of the altar, when you don't feel like it anymore. All the stuff you're talking about, the feelings piece of it. You don't feel like being dad, but you are dad. You don't feel like hearing what everybody has to say because you were tired, long days. Guess what? Doesn't matter. Right? You don't feel like going to work. Guess what? Doesn't matter. It's your job, your responsibility. So maybe what people say, well, you're too young, it just means they're not ready because they're immature. And I don't mean that necessarily in age-wise, but I mean that mentally, spiritually, emotionally, they're not there. And to your point, Meeks, I mean, Mom and I met in high school. We met when I was 15 too. And I can look back and say, Mom is ride or die. Mom has been with me through. I don't have to worry about her looking for Daddy Warbucks, right? Looking for she's not a gold digger. Why? Because she knew me when I was broke. She knew me when I was making $4.25 an hour when she was supporting me working at Taco Bell. So like we have all of that. The beauty of that is now I have a battle partner, as we hear in sacred scripture, to come alongside me and pick me up and point me towards Christ and say, look, it's not about the material thing. It's not about the house. It's not about the job. It's not about any of the things outside of we're called to this vocation together. Let's raise a beautiful family. Let's help them grow in virtue and holiness, and let's get them to heaven. What say you, Keone?
I just think it's, you mentioned virtue, because we can take this in either extreme. Mm-hmm. Like, well, that's me. As soon as I find someone who's pushing me to heaven, we just got to get married, and that can be a state where it's like, okay, at least finish high school, and have some sort of prudence, So I think there is some discernment. This is why it is discerning, like there is prudence that is involved, where it's, okay, maybe it's not the right time. Let's wait a year because I get the degree and I'm working hard to get something lined up so that I can support my wife and my family, my future family, if God wills it. I think that's also important, to be prudent and to have, just that temperance where you're like, okay, I'm not going to sway the other way because, you don't want to,
struggle.
Yeah. You don't
suffer,
want to struggle. Yeah.
Sacrifice where you're not ready for marriage, right?
Exactly. And so there's either way that we can go, and we can tend to overcompensate. We can tend to over spiritualize things. Yeah. And so I think it's, it takes a lot of discernment, a lot of prudence and temperance, and just allowing God to work, because there is going to be some suffering, but you still have to be prudent. You're not going to just go in and say, hey, we have a car, but it has one tire, and, and just go in hoping that the road to heaven is going to be good, if you haven't done the work to prepare in a certain sense, because you're not going to have it all figured out. Like Meeks was saying, you're not going to be completely ready. But I do think there's a healthy prudence to do what you can to be ready. For sure. I just wanted to bring that point up as, we want to do what God wills. And oftentimes we ourselves, because of our attachments, our fears, our sins, whatever, we tend to go one way or the other. So just kind of bringing us back to the center.
All right. Parting words, because man, we've been going at this now for 40 some minutes. So it's been a good topic, but parting words makes from the one who is about to get married, who, 60 days from now, you're going to be a husband, and if God wills it, soon thereafter be a father. So what do you got to say to your peers?
And I'll also be in Hawaii. So what's going on, guys? Other than that, though, I mean, for this, I guess mine would be more for young people, because I'm not going to sit and try to tell adults how to, do their relationship. You guys are doing it better than I am, I promise you. Just for young people, stop listening to the nonsense. When you know, and you just got to pull the trigger, man. That's it. You'll never be ready, I promise you, even though you can have an understanding of what marriage is and the cross and stuff like that. You still won't be ready after you understand that. If you wait another 5 years, you won't be ready after that. I mean, the reality, I like my boy Tim Gordon, because he just says, if you find the one, it doesn't take you that long. It should take you on 6 months to find out that's the one. Propose. You guys aren't going to be living away or not having intimate relationships for longer than a year if you're young and stuff like that. So just get married and have kids and all stuff and be open. Just that, I don't know, that fear that young people have, I'm not a huge fan of. But I've also seen my parents at a young age marry and at work, and be really grateful that they did do that, and they were so open to God's calling and that kind of stuff. So like, just don't be scared of that, and then just have humility, because that's the biggest thing. Me in this marriage prep process, me just reflecting on getting married, it's just a lot of humility. Understand, that was one thing I wanted to bring up, was like, for a lot of my relationship, it seemed like I was trying to show Ella all these things, and she was like almost catching up to me within the faith and some of my whatever philosophies and just maturity, whatever, be emotionally and stuff like that. And I didn't look enough at myself, at what I could work on, as, I mean, only being 15, 16, obviously it's hard to do that. But now I'm saying, well, there are so many things I had to work on. Just because I was the practicing Catholic doesn't mean I didn't have my failures and so many other vices elsewhere. And so like, having that humility and always being able to look at yourself and like, man, how am I going to make this relationship better? It's not just about, making sure they go to mass, which is obviously huge, but like, how am I taking all that issues I have and patience and stuff, and how's that reflecting on her? Or how am I taking this relationship? How's it going to affect kids and all those kind of things? So there's just a lot that goes into it, and it is scary, but like, just do it, don't be scared. You just got to do it. It's life,
Yeah, and I think also surround yourself with a good support system, right? You can have this discussion with your siblings, with your peers, with your parents, people that know you well enough, people that you trust, and people that can guide you along the way. What say you, Keone?
Kind of going off what you're saying as far as community, if you're wanting to find the one and, you're spending most of your time at bars or, in areas, parties or hangouts that, aren't really like find the one environments, I would just encourage you to try to, expand your horizon, join a group or, something like that. So that's one thing, is community is huge. Of like, if you want to find a good fish, you go out to the better side of the ocean, so that's something that I wanted to point out. But also, just first, for the women out there, to, like you were speaking to earlier, don't lower your standards for us men who usually take a little extra years to figure out how to grow up and mature. Don't lower your standards. Actually be the queen and princess that men could actually aspire to be like a knight, to sit, and to earn just your attention. Like, let's get back to that, where like women were so prized, and that men like, oh, I need to step up. I need to dress up and wear that tuxedo to take her to dinner, that type of thing. I don't know if it has to be that extreme, but just that idea of like, we have to earn it, and then for men, it's just the idea of just stepping up in general. I think men are just, right now, there's just this overwhelming, and we talked about in our false religions episode, of like, we're so consumed with our video games, our sports teams, getting the money, having the job, having the car. It's so material. And then we're like, I'll get married when I'm 35. And it's like, yeah, but, and it's like, there's this unhappiness, there's this aversion to suffering, there's this, it's like a fear almost to settle down. Yeah. Like
effeminacy.
Yeah.
We talked about effeminacy, right?
And so just for the men out there who are, if you are, striving to be virtuous, to have the open conversations with women you're really truly discerning, dating with, and having that relationship with, to be the man, to lead, to be patient though, but to lead. And those that are watching this, and I don't know why they're watching this, but they're watching this and they're not living a life of faith, to start to have that conversation for yourself, like Meeks, like reflect on your own sins, your own vices, have that humility, be like, okay, I need to change first before I can even think about trying to help another person get to heaven.
Yeah, I guess the last thing I would have to say is, this has to be rooted in Christ. Your faith has to be at the core. This is just way too hard of a vocation to try to live and do it on your own, according to your own volition, your own strength, your own will. It ain't going to work. So, God's got to be at the center. And I would say also realize that it's a journey. Marriage is a beautiful thing, but it's also a cross, and that it requires sacrifice. At times you're going to feel nailed to that bad boy, and that's just really the ultimate sign of love for us, is that it's a self-giving love, and it does not count the cost, but it's the most beautiful thing, right? That you can sit here and you can look at, your spouse, your bride, your husband, and realize like, wow, God blessed me with that. And then if children comes, because if God blesses you with that, man, there's nothing better, right? I'm living the dream when I'm thinking about PPK and the podcast, because I get to see the invisible love between mom and I made visible. You're about to get to experience that too, right? And Meeks, you got that, God willing, ahead of you as well in a few months here. No pressure, but you're not ready.
Right, no, I will be.
Yeah. So what else we got to say, Meeks?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this one thing I heard. It was full of shit. I was listening to that guy. He was like talking about a way for wives to help their husbands, and a good one is ultimatums. He told me that's what he was telling me that. And he was like, a lot of wives tell husbands, if you don't like and subscribe and comment to PPK, sleep on the couch. And it always works, is what a Fallen Ching told me, personally. And so I would just throw that out there. You guys can chew on it. Let me know what you think in the comments.
Well, yeah, we do appreciate your time with us. A longer episode, but a good episode on dating discernment. And are you too young to get married? Keep us in your prayers. We've got Miko in 60 days and plus and counting, getting married with Ella. So pray for them. Pray for all those discerning vocation. Like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you want to hear. And until the next episode, get holy or die trying. Peace.